With me now, Vice President Mike Pence's Chief of Staff, Mark Short. Mark, thank you for being back on the show.
Good morning, Hallie. Good to see you again.
You as well. Let me talk about this hurricane here. In 2008, as you remember, Republicans changed up the first night of programming at the convention because of a storm that was set to hit the Gulf Coast. What changes are we anticipating or can we expect to see tonight? Might the president address this storm in his remarks?
I'm sure he will address the storm in his remarks, Hallie, but we look forward to the president's remarks tonight, offering a much broader vision about America that he sees over the next 4 years versus one that we see on the other side that leads to socialism and decline. But as you mentioned in your lead-in, the president will be going over to FEMA this afternoon to get a briefing. The vice president will be joining him for that. And we do continue to encourage people that are still in the path of the storm to heed their local and state guidance to stay safe. And we do expect there'll be significant flooding interior parts of the United States.
I want to talk more about the vice president's speech last night, but I want to also quickly get you on something that happened after the speech, which was this sort of rope line that happened. It appeared spontaneously. The president, the vice president, their wives in this buffer zone greeting veterans, no masks. You can see some of the video here, which is raising questions. I saw a fist bump at one point from your boss with somebody in the crowd, raising questions about COVID testing. Was everybody at this event last night at the speech tested for COVID prior?
You know, Hallie, the people who were backstage with the president and the vice president were tested. Others were given guidance that their seating was socially distanced and gave guidance on masks, and also had some other measures such as temperature checks taken beforehand. But, you know, Hallie, I do think that because the vice president gave such a strong speech and laid out such a stark difference, it's no surprise that the media wants to focus on mask shaming this morning. If the vice president can go and have
Mark, I'm sorry, Mark, you're really misunderstanding me. It's not at all mask shaming. Wait a second, Mark. No, that is not fair. Because this is the president and the vice president, and it's a question on COVID testing, Mark. You're not answering it. You're not answering the question.
Fist bumped is a wounded warrior who served our country and is a hero. And if he puts his hand out to ask for a fist bump, I don't think it's a surprise the vice president's going to do that.
I don't think anybody has an issue with that. The question is, were the people in those front rows or in the entire audience COVID tested? It's not a tough question, Mark.
And I answered your question, Hallie. I told you the people that were backstage.
No, you didn't. You said people backstage were tested.
I did, Hallie.
So is that a no for everybody else?
Were tested, and I said that others were given guidance about staying in their seats to be socially distanced, as well as some had masks, and as well as they were temperature checked.
Okay. So no COVID testing then. Let's just put this in plain English.
There were some that were, and it was not universal because, again, the buffer was there to keep the president, vice president from the rest of the crowd.
Yeah, I want to talk about the vice president's speech and specifically some of the themes that he touched on, including mentioning protests and unrest in Kenosha, Wisconsin. That was part of the VP's speech. I'm wondering why he felt it was not necessary to mention Jacob Blake by name.
Hallie, I think what you heard the vice president say in that, I think, terrific setting that is a historic landmark in our American history, he talked about all that our heroes have given and sacrificed to protect the freedoms of America, and the violence must stop. That was a universal statement about the violence must stop, period, on all ends of this. And I think that the vice president mentioned, obviously, Minneapolis, Portland, and Kenosha, but was speaking universally that saying it is time for the violence to end. We respect and honor people who peacefully protest. We want to protect those rights always. But at the same time, burning down churches, burning down buildings, burning down businesses is not peaceful protest, and it must end.
Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have now both said they've spoken to Jacob Blake's family. Has the vice president reached out as well?
I think that at this point there'll be additional outreach, Hallie, but I don't think he's spoken to them yet.
And so, to be clear, does he plan to speak to the Blake family?
Hallie, I think that there will be conversations happening, but I'm not offering anything to you right now to make news on that point today.
Just trying to get some clarity on the additional outreach that you mentioned to law enforcement or to the family is just what I'm trying to get an understanding of.
I think that you're going to see the vice president continue to travel to a lot of the communities that have been impacted and affected, and there'll be more to come on that in days ahead.
Okay. Including Kenosha, perhaps? I know he has some potential trips on the schedule to the region, I should say.
Perhaps.
Okay, so that is something that's on the table. At one point, the vice president, in his remarks, said a line that's getting a lot of attention, Mark. He said, "You will not be safe in Joe Biden's America." I want to play for you what LA Clippers coach Doc Rivers said about this idea of fear at the Republican National Convention, about what happened with Jacob Blake, and about your administration. I want to play that for you.
Okay.
All you hear is Donald Trump and all of them talking about fear. We're the ones getting killed. All you do is keep hearing about fear. It's amazing to me why we keep loving this country and this country does not love us back.
Extremely emotional discussion there. How do you respond to that, Mark?
Well, you know, when there was the initial outbreak of violence after the violence in Minneapolis, the vice president expressed his condolences to families and said that we can't tolerate that in our country. But he also went on a tour across the country, many communities he met with African-American leaders. And in those conversations, the people who expressed the most fear were African-Americans who felt their communities were not safe. And they felt fear from protesters who had destroyed their businesses and their livelihoods. That's what this administration is looking to make sure that we protect, is the business and livelihoods of all Americans, white, black, Asian, any race, any creed, any color. And that's why we need to make sure that we're protecting and having law and order on our streets. That's been a consistent message from the administration, and you'll continue to hear it. I do think that it's reality that you look at the policies that the other side has advocated. In many cases, some on their side have advocated for a full defunding of police. Others have advocated for less funding of police. That's not going to make our communities more safe, Hallie. And I think that that's what the vice president was commenting on last night.
And of course, we should note here that Joe Biden himself does not support defunding the police. Mark, you said that people feel unsafe and are talking about the fear that they feel. Many, as you know, members of the black community feel fear because of the systemic racism in this country. And Donald Trump is currently the president in this environment that, as you described, people feel unsafe. So if people are feeling unsafe now under a Trump administration, do you not bear some responsibility for that, you and the vice president and of course, President Trump?
So, Hallie, let's step back for 1 second. Joe Biden did say, when asked, he would absolutely decrease funding to police. Secondly, I think
he was talking about specifically vehicles and sort of the apparatus for police. He has specifically said he does not want to defund police. I'm not trying to get in a big fact check with you, Mark. I just wanted to make that point.
That's fine, but you're acknowledging he said he would decrease funding to police. So I appreciate that affirmation.
No, I'm not at all, actually. I'm saying he did not say he would defund the police. I think the remark that you're... Mark, I'm not...
You did. But
I disagree with your assessment. I'm truly not trying to get into this back and forth with you.
He has advocated for decreased funding of police, and I think that's a point that this administration has laid out. I think it is a contrast in visions. But, you know, I think in many of these cities that have been run by Democrats for decades, there has been a significant amount of violence. But, you know, at the same time, when the media, when we've sent in
There's also violence in cities that are led by Republicans, Mark, right?
Hallie, when we've sent in federal protective services to help make sure the violence is quelled, the media has criticized that as a federal government action. And at the same time, it's a question of saying, well, if you don't, then Trump deserves the blame for what's happened in these Democrat-run cities. We are going to take action to help make sure that people in our country are safe. It's time to end the violence. That's what you heard clearly last night.
Before I let you go, I want to get you on this, what we discussed in the segment before you came on, which is this cultural inflection point with the NBA and this boycott here. Is that something that Vice President Pence supports?
You know, Hallie, I think that our country has a cherished history of people protesting racial injustices, and that should be protected. At the same time, I think that there is a contrast that when the Houston Rockets general manager tries to stand for people peacefully protesting in Hong Kong, he gets shouted down by the NBA because they want to have a partnership with the Communist Party of China, and where there's been continued repression and persecution and actually killings of people who are disagree with the Communist Party of China's positions. So I do think that there is a contrast and inconsistency with the NBA positions. If the NBA chooses to boycott, they're in a fortunate position, and a lot of their players get millions of dollars in salary each and every year. I've not heard them being offering to give up their salaries. They're just looking to say, we're not going to play the game. So I think there'll probably be conversations. This administration has reached out to professional athletes on many occasions. You've seen many of them participate in our convention this week. But I do think that there is an inconsistency in the NBA's positions.
Earlier in a different interview, I believe you called the idea of the boycotts silly and absurd. Do you see how that might be offensive to a lot of people in the black community
and
and, frankly, in every community across America?
Sure. I think you just heard me answer the question that in reality we've had a long and cherished history of people protesting racial injustice in our country. And that should be protected. But I think even in that interview this morning, it was phrased in a contrast to saying that what they've taken a position on China and basically embrace the Communist Party of China's participation with NBA, wanting to explore more opportunities there. There is a contrast to the positions that they've been taking.
Thank you for checking out our YouTube channel. Why don't you subscribe? It's really easy. Just click on that button down there. And for more news from MSNBC, click on any of these videos here for the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more videos from MSNBC with our newsletters. Head over to msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up.